cord to this computer. Okay. I don't know if I actually need this, but let's just see. So it doesn't look like anyone's zooming in, but I will still record class today, so we can talk. We got, why don't you guys come forward a little bit? Make a slightly smaller circle. I mean, you guys are okay. You guys are all right. All right, let's see who's here and who is not. We got Justin's here, Bennett's here, Charles is here. Also known as Charlie. How about Morgan? No Morgan today? Or at least not yet.
I didn't hear from her this morning. You said she told me when she's left already.
Patty is here. Rick is here. Crystal is here. Courtney is here. Luke is here. Lisa is here. About Joe. No Joe today? What about Dylan? No Dylan. Okay. So we'll see if they Zoom or whatever. Okay. So, you know, those of you who have had me before, which is really almost all of you, you remember those quizzes that I used to do? So I just decided to kind of do it as a handout. It will give me focus. It will help you write stuff down that I think you should know. Good stuff like that, okay? And everything I give you will be 3-hole punch.
Are we getting this back to you? We're not? Okay.
Yep. No. Yes. Thank you for understanding my one-word answers. All right. So looks like I have the one for next class, the first one. So that's for next class. All right. And there's another one as well next class, but that one was still printing. So either I'll go get it and give it to you at the end, or I'll give it to you at the beginning of next class. Cool. Extras. This is online as well on Canvas. So if you prefer to take your notes on your computer, you can. Hi, Dylan. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. So I just handed out the handout for today. Now this is like a sheet of like notes that you can take, so that like you can like remember stuff. If you go to Canvas, it's there, so you can download it and fill it in as we talk. Good. Sounds good. All right. All right. So this is Intro to Literature. So we should probably talk about what is literature, huh? And genres and all that good stuff. The textbook is not too bad considering it's free, right? Yeah, okay. So I don't think I printed that for you. But tell me what you remember about literature from your textbook. So I have the first question is like review literary terminology. What are some terms that people in literature classes often use? Symbolism, which is not exactly one we read for today, but we will talk about, right? Good. Symbolism. Look, I got fancy markers. Nice, right? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so symbolism is one thing. What else? We got literature with a capital L. Literature, we'll talk about what is literature. How do you know it's literature? Related to this, related to literature is the canon. I'll let you know what we mean when we talk about canon. Okay, what else? Other terms you remember? Can be easy, like let's start with very low hanging fruit this morning. Prose and poetry. What did you say, Patty? Syntax. Okay, I'm gonna put syntax over here. Syntax, because those ones are kind of more technical. We're gonna start at the low end today with prose. Okay, and poetry. You know what, JK, I'm gonna put it like this. Okay, so generally when you're talking about literature, it can be, this is my kind of like, it's almost like, have you taken bio classes where they like have like, here's the class and here's the genius and here's the species and here's the whatever. All right, so literature is at top, and then literature kind of is encapsulated by either prose or poetry, and there's one more kind of big genre, drama. Okay, good. Tell me about prose or poetry, either, or drama. Tell me about one of them.
Long works of like literature following
Yeah. So we have, for prose, we have like subgenres, like a novel, right? So we got subgenre,
There's like short stories,
novel,
prose.
short story.
I think they talked about novellas.
Yeah, novella. All right, good. So, yeah. So like subgenres of prose could be a novel, novella, a short story. There are others too. So you can kind of look at the length, right? So subgenres can be, these are all length. You can also look at like common themes or characters, right? So this is kind of like a type. So I actually usually call this the subgenre, but can you think of some examples of this?
Some more examples of what?
Like the subgenre,
Oh, like
comedy, right?
tragedy,
Comedy, tragedy,
fiction and nonfiction.
I'm gonna put fiction and nonfiction. Well,
I guess no.
we can do memoir. Memoir is a particular kind of nonfiction. You're right. I was thinking like more like
I was too broad with that.
yeah, I
You
mean,
get what I'm trying to say.
fiction and nonfiction are kind of, yeah. It's not perfect. It's not scientific because we are literary people, right? But what else we got here? I got sci-fi, fantasy, right? Romance, yeah.
War.
Crime, war. I had a couple that, oh, epic, gothic. Yeah. Epic, gothic. Epic, we got lyric. There are different types of poetry. There's epic poetry, there's lyric poetry, there's narrative poetry. So what makes poetry different from prose?
Prose is more like straight to the point, literal, and poetry has like different meanings, like qualities.
So prose is like usually complete sentences, right? And usually, I think what Patty's getting at, you said like literal, anything else? What? Literal. Go ahead, Crystal.
I feel like the main difference between poetry and prose is that poetry is more like rhythmic and like
That's what they use. Yeah. So poetry is rhythmic. It's kind of foregrounding the sound, whereas this is kind of foregrounding, like kind of more like meaning, right? So literal story, priority is meaning.
Subject matter more than.
Exactly. Whereas poetry is, we have rhythmic rhythm. I don't never know how to spell rhythm, but I think that's it.
That's good.
That's good, right? Right, it's the same, right? Why is there a Y in it weirdly? And then several H's, I don't know. It's all about kind of like the sound and like the words themselves, right?
Really flowery.
Or like they stand alone, right? So the words carry more import. Okay. What did I have? Poetry is rhythmic, meaning is secondary to sounds or visuals, and usually it's in lines. Not always, but usually it's in shorter, like more condensed form. Condensed lines. Okay. And there's, subtypes and subgenres of poetry. There's subtypes and subgenres of prose. And that can either be like length, it can be type, or it can be context. This is the last kind of way we kind of break this down, okay? So context would be like, when was it written? So you probably already have, but if you haven't, you might take, world literature 1, world literature 2, world literature 3. It's usually like, right? Usually grouped according to when and the culture, right? So the time and culture in which it was composed. So those are kind of ways we kind of break stuff down and down. This class, Intro to Literature, I'm gonna try to do most of this stuff, right? Okay, I'm gonna try to get a little glimpse of lots of things, but we can't cover everything because it's just an intro class, okay? And we're gonna actually do more about, in this class, the way I've designed it, we're gonna do more with like literary elements, symbolism, theme, point of view, characterization, stuff like that, and less with like comparing a novel, novella, and short story. We're not reading any novels, so no novellas either, although there's some cool novellas out there. We're not going to get into these, okay? This is generally like later. That's a 300 level. Usually we do this with themes in literature. So literature of music, which you guys, some of you are in right now, war literature, young adult literature, stuff like that, okay? All right, drama. Really easy kind of definition compared to the other two, especially prose. Yep.
Literature that will be performed.
Yep, exactly. It's made to be performed. To be performed. There's going to definitely be some overlap. So have you guys ever heard of slam poetry? Slam poetry is kind of walking this line, right? I don't know if anyone's ever read Lydia Davis, but she's kind of walking this line, okay? Her stuff is like either very, very short fiction or long poems, unconventional poems, okay? So as in most things in the humanities, rules, we have them and we have them in order to break them, right? We like to have rules and then to break them all over the place. What about fiction versus nonfiction? I thought the video was fun. I liked the video. She's like, fiction is fact. No, wait, actually, JK, fiction is not fact, right? That she does that, she plays that trick on us. So there's fiction. Fiction is what? Not real. Made up, right? Made up. Fiction is made up, okay? Whereas nonfiction, somewhat real somehow. Can you think of some subgenres of nonfiction? Biography, memoir is a particular kind of autobiography, right? There's a biography.
Nonfiction can fall into like history and stuff like that. But it doesn't always. have
And
to be, like,
newspaper
exact
reporting, right?
verbatim, like, there can be things that are like altered about it, but still
Yes.
not.
Paper reporting as well as, what did you say?
But like
History. Good. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, whereas fiction is more like this kind of stuff. Yeah, okay. It's our taxonomy. So now you'll know what I mean when I say this particular thing is a bit of flash fiction. Super, super short, shorter than short. Okay, stories, good. And in your analytic responses, you'll be able to say, this short story has a character of blank, or this narrative poem tells the story of blank, or, you know, this bit of prose does this, okay? All right? It's just helpful. It's helpful to kind of, it's like a shorthand, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to describe a particular piece of literature. Good? Good. Excellent. All right, so that should be first question done. Good? All right. What do teachers mean when they ask you to analyze? As I will do this Thursday. You have your first analytic response due by midnight this Thursday. What do I want?
You want to make sure you're possibly comparing or at least focusing on specific aspects of it.
Yeah.
and looking further into it.
Yeah, so we've got analysis. Oops. Just one analysis. And it has like
Comparison.
axes, right? Is the thing they talk about. So A X E. Having way too much fun with markers. I think they're distracting. All right. All right. Tell me what the A is. I had to keep looking it up because I just want to say analysis. But what is A? Like an assertion, I say, okay? An assertion. So you want to say something. Thing is about something, assertion. Basically, another word for this is a claim. Bennett, were you in analytic in college writing with me?
Yeah, it was freshman year spring semester, I think.
So pull back, look, feel all the way back, think all the way back, and Luke as well, all the way back to last semester, right? You need to have some kind of assertion. You need to have some kind of claim. You need to have some kind of topic or a focus, okay? All right? It doesn't have to be the first thing you start with, but eventually you're gonna have to have one of these, okay? X stands for examples. All right, examples. What does this mean for us? Generally, it's going to be quotes, right? Because the words are really important. Even in this, where the words are secondary, the specific words are still very, very important. Examples are going to be quotes. Okay. Details. Facts.
Comparisons.
Specifics. Yeah, yeah. I mean, a comparison might be some kind of blend of this, right? Like your kind of focus or your claim is that, you know, in comparing these two, the second one illustrates this better or something like that. Okay. Good. Assertion, example. Yeah. Explanation, or like you kind of translate it. So translate the quote. Say what it says in as many times and as many ways as possible. You too, right? You were in a college writing, right? Yeah, yeah. You guys were in the same class. weren't you?
That was a year before.
So interpret. For those of you who were in that class, you could do like what is it? The paraphrase times 3, focus, free writing, right? Paraphrase. Look at the synonyms. word choice. All right, talk about all that good stuff, okay, when you explain your example and connect it to there. And then S,
Significance.
yeah. What does it mean? What does it show? Why is it important? How does it relate back out to life? Depending on what I'm asking you to write or what your professors are asking you to write, you can start with certain things and kind of do other things later. For your analytic responses, it's okay if you want to kind of start with this, and then kind of move back out to this stuff, okay? All right, good. And then make the claim last, okay? For your more formal papers, you need a thesis that is then kind of driven by examples and evidence and making meaning of the evidence and good stuff like that. So for most of your analytic responses, starting here is good. It can be a little bit more rough. It doesn't need to have a thesis at the beginning, stuff like that, okay? For your formal papers, it will need that stuff. And for your presentations, they're kind of just like a verbal form of your analytic responses. Okay. Don't forget to sign up for days, and I will, don't let me forget to get your dates before we leave. Good? All right. What are some elements to make sure you include when you analyze anything? Got to have evidence, and you got to say what it means. You got to have evidence that you interpret. Can't just have interpretations without evidence. You can't just have evidence without interpretations, right? Those are some pitfalls. So things you want to avoid here, like I called them pitfalls. But these are things you want to avoid. These are things I do not want in your analytic responses, or at least they're things that you can't just do this and call it good. You can do it as your first step, but you can't just stop there. All right. So these things are things to avoid. What should you avoid?
Opinions without.
Yeah. So they call it
ideas.
they had a review, which I thought was a good way to kind of think about it, right? So avoid simple review.
Summarizations, your big one.
Summary, I don't need you to summarize something for me. I read it. Promise. You can trust that I read it. So ignore the summary, especially the summary of the huge, general, broad summary. A little summary is okay, as long as you're keeping it focused and grounded in details, and then analyze it. Yep. So a review is kind of declarative statements of taste. I hated this poem because of this. Like, try to avoid review, right? Or like, this is like taste, or Shakespeare is the greatest writer ever because blah. It's like, you don't need that part, right? Just go to the because blah, right? Yeah. So avoid review, which is like opinions based on taste. Avoid summary. They said look out for tangents as well. And this reminds me of that time my dad turned 40, right? No, don't do that, right? This piece of, George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant reminds me very much of that final I took last. No, don't do that. All right. Okay, so try to avoid tangents. So tangents is like something that's easier for you to talk about, okay, than to actually analyze. Like it's like, yeah.
Also, tangent is like short for rant. Don't go on a rant.
Exactly. Tangent is another word for rant. Yes. The word comes from math. You know what a tangent is in math?
Okay.
So like, I don't remember much from math, but like sometimes you have a graph. This looks right. And then the tangent is like something that goes off that way. right? So instead of like keeping your focus on the thing, you end up going off into left field, right? That's what the tangent is. That's where the word comes from, okay? So try to avoid reviews, summaries, and tangents, okay? Instead, if you need to do these things, use it as a springboard for analysis and then go back and take them out, especially with your analytic responses because they're only 2 pages, double spaced. You don't have time for this stuff if you're going to actually do what you need to do here. All right. So we've talked about poetry and prose. We've talked about what teachers want. We've talked about what we don't want. I hope this is helpful to you and will be helpful to you with your first writing assignment. Last thing is, let's talk about literature. You have to say it with a French accent and a capital L. Literature, right? What is literature? How do we define it?
Any written work.
Yeah, it used to be anything written with letters, right? Yeah, letters. Yeah, it used to be anything written.
But then it changed when started transforming plays and performances by like only oral into written words.
Yeah. So it used to be anything written down, and then people were like, "What about the oral stuff, like the Odyssey, right,
I was
or
just
the
gonna-
Iliad?" Yeah. Is anyone in that war class with me? Here, you were. Yeah, good. Were you sick? Were you in war? You weren't, right? So we read the Iliad there. Okay. It used to be anything written down, but then we decided that that was not broad enough. And so then we kind of extended it, but also then we kind of narrowed it to what? Like if you were to say like, okay, how would you define literature as opposed to trash fiction, trashy fiction? What would you say? How could you define literature? This isn't the one that was recommended, so I don't like really expect you to kind of have it, but like they made some good points in this one. So like we tend to like think of literature as like stuff that people agree is like the best of the best. Yeah. Like historically significant, influential, critics like it, right? Makes sense? So anything written down, and then we kind of said, well, it's the best stories out there. According to professors and critics, which are kind of similar to professors.
Other authors.
Yeah, best stories out there. According to, I'm gonna put experts, which is nice and vague, right? According to experts. But then we decided that, okay, so it's the best stories out there. Literature became known as the canon. Anyone heard of the canon? The canon? I heard it when I first went to college. I was like, what is this word? And why do people keep saying it? Right? Okay. So best stories out there, generally the canon. When you had to read literature, it's only got one N, or one N there.
Plato and considered to be in the canon.
Yeah, I think so.
Philosophy, like the higher ranks of literature.
It's the higher, so thinking about Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Right, Shakespeare and Hamlet, specifically Hamlet, right? We don't talk about those comedies, right? So Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, it's pinnacle, right? Macbeth, all that good stuff. Anyone had to read Great Expectations? The bane of my sophomore English experience. We had to read that. Robert Frost.
What Homer? Like the
Homer,
Macbeth?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, we could put Homer there. Homer. We could put Beowulf. Beowulf, right? Shakespeare.
The one with the little kid, I can't
I was gonna say that just, I don't, like, it'd be very impressive if I got Well, we said great expectations. That's the only one with a little kid, but I know Pip is such a little.
I'll think
What
about
about,
it.
I just, a present example, with Atticus Finch, what's the name of that?
Hello, Mockingbird?
Yes.
Yeah. Kill a mockingbird, right? Or is it that I know why the cage bird sings? I
No,
always
it's-
get
no,
those.
It's
confused.
to kill a mockingbird.
Okay, good. All right, good. All right. Kill a Mockingbird. We got Shakespeare. We got Dickens. There's a couple of poets.
Sylvia Plath.
You might have read them. Maybe Sylvia Plath a
In
little
my
bit.
book- In my book, she's.
Pope? Yeah,
Pope.
yeah. Alexander Pope.
That's not what I said.
Poe.
Oh,
Pope.
Poe. Oh, Poe.
But yes.
I was gonna
Poe.
say, wow, like I'm impressed. Like you know, Alexander. Yeah. Poe is a little bit marginal. Philip Plath similar. Even this one's similarly kind of marginal to the canon.
Is that not different?
No, I was talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, which is written by Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
Right? Usually, you think of canon, you think Homer, Beowulf, Shakespeare, Chaucer.
Yeah,
Who else? Are you the only one? I guess Morgan.
yeah, Morgan would have.
Chaucer. I mean, really, those were the big ones. Ben Jonson was kind of big. We don't even read that stuff anymore. But if you'll notice, the best stories out there, the canon, Keats is one of them. Justin, you remember reading stuff by Byron or Keats, or they're poets, so it's harder, but like, yeah. Notice anything about them? They're all super educated, white European men, right? Yeah. So then we kind of decided, well, okay, the canon seems a bit problematic. Yes? Because there's all kinds of good stuff that's out there that's written by people that are not in the canon.
I remember the little boy. It was Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, yeah. Mark Twain stuff. Yeah. Twain. So he did Huckleberry Finn and the other one, right? Tom Sawyer. Good, excellent. Okay. So literature is anything written down. Maybe some people think they're the best stories out there, according to certain experts, and maybe not, right? You get to decide what's your literature. Okay, good. And in this class, we're going to put pressure on this bit, right? This tradition where the only thing that's literature is stuff written by very highly educated men hundreds of years ago. Why read literature? This is also not in your reading for today, but I thought it was cool. Why read literature? Especially if it's full of dead white men. Okay, so first off, it's fun, right? Some of us, not too many of us, because we're at Nichols, but some of us, right, think it's actually kind of fun. We read for enjoyment. We read because, I don't know, it's some kind of like a outlet, a stress relief, right? Fills a creative need, right?
And of Scott Fitzgerald, he has a lot of relatable stories.
Yeah. He should be over here, Fitzgerald, right? Yeah.
Well, also,
I love A Rose for Emily.
it's
Such
a
a good.
really good way to like be more cultured and historically informed, because a lot of older literature teaches you so much about history that it's almost like handed.
Even if you read trash literature, you're gonna
Yeah.
learn, right? Yeah, right.
Good for
Um,
vocabulary.
Yeah, you increase your vocabulary. You learn about historical periods, or you learn about, weapons, or like anything that you read, even the trashiest literature, you learn and you have fun. So they talk about also that it helps you when you read. There's all kinds of this psychology that shows that when you're reading something about someone, you respond to that story as if you're there. And so it actually helps you to live the lives of others, right? Which teaches you empathy, right? So another way to read is to kind of get to experience things that you'll never experience. It's a way to travel to Africa, without actually having to travel to Africa and risk COVID and all that good stuff, right? It's a way to travel back in time and experience what life was like back in that time. It's a way to kind of envision the future or one person's, take on the future. And so it's fun, helps you learn, it creates a lot of empathy. And finally, it helps us appreciate language, which is actually, language itself is kind of slippery and kind of tricky and kind of complex and not always as easy or as clear as we think it is. So it also helps us appreciate and better use language, words, communication, that good stuff. Okay. Good. Good. Thank you for doing, I felt obligated that we should probably talk about this stuff the first day. So thank you for doing all that fun stuff with me. Okay. All right, let's talk about the story. Women Hollering Creek. All right. Sometimes when I talk about stories, I have to sit. Sorry. Good? Good, Dylan? Okay. All right. Tell me about this story. What did you notice when you were reading? Anyone read it before? Let's talk about the main character. Good. Tell me about the main character. What's her name? Cleophila. Yeah. Good. In fact, like her name is one of the things that she talks about in the story, right? It's not the name of a jewel. It's just boring and plain and old, right? Good. So what is Cleophila like? What's her situation? What's her dilemma?
She has one kid and she's got another.
Good.
Her husband,
Married. So she's got an abusive to an abusive guy. She's got one kid. That's one on the way, right? She's pregnant. Good. So she's married to an abusive guy. What else? That's great, kind of bare bones of it. Anything else we should kind of think about her situation?
I feel like it's a pretty powerless situation. Someone had to ask for her permission to leave her household.
Married in an abusive relationship and she's rendered powerless.
And she always has to ask for permission to do something or let her husband or fiance know that she's supposed to do something.
She's empowered by men, by her specific man, as well as generally men, right? By men, I'm going to say also patriarchy. Patriarchy is kind of the idea that the man is kind of the head of the household and controls the money and controls the situation and stuff like that. Go ahead.
She's also supposed to represent La Llorona or whatever.
What is it?
La Llorona.
La Lorna. That's the
Weeping woman.
weeping woman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
yeah.
what the story was supposed to.
I'm gonna put. How do you spell it?
LLORA.
LL.
Yep, it's like
Oh.
a J sound. O-R-A-N-A.
Oh, I don't know. Okay, yes. Also, isn't she Mexican living in America?
Yeah.
So she's also got an immigrant experience that's also kind of another way she's been disempowered, right? Okay, let's kind of talk even more about her. All right, so look at the very first page of Woman Hollering Creek. Oh, my ears, my ears. Okay. The day Don Serafin gave Juan Pedro Martinez Sanchez permission to take Cleofilas Enriqueta de Leon Hernandez as his bride across her father's threshold over several miles of dirt road and several miles of paved over one border and beyond to a town, and el otro lado on the other side, already did he divine the morning his daughter would raise her hand over her eyes, look south, and dream of returning to the chores that never ended, 6 good-for-nothing brothers and 1 old man's complaints. It is a long first sentence, right? What do you notice about it? If you look at the way it's written. Yes, that's true. Yes, it's a run-on sentence, so there's a lot here. A lot of commas, dashes, right? I always like, it always strikes me when I read this first sentence, like how she's kind of like secondary in her own story. Does that make sense? The day Don Serafin, her dad, gave Juan Pedro Martinez, her husband, permission to take her as his bride across the threshold, over these miles, over the border to the other side, right? He knew that she would at one point be unhappy, right? Does that make sense? So even the first sentence here kind of demonstrates how she's like secondary to her own story, how she is disempowered by patriarchy and the expectations of marriage, maybe especially the expectations of marriage in Latino culture, in Chicano culture, right? All right. All right. I am your father, I will never abandon you, is what he said to her. At the bottom of this, she says, only now as a mother did she remember that her dad said, you know, I am your father, I will never abandon you. Now, when she and Juan Pedrito sat by the creek's edge, how when a man and a woman love each other, sometimes that love sours, but a parent's love for a child's for its parents is another thing entirely. So what is, I have that line highlighted, right? Yeah, like, so what is maybe one of the themes in this story? It's love, right? Love and like heterosexual love in a patriarchy versus parental familial love, right?
And I could tell when she said that in her mind, she thinks that suffering for love is a good thing.
Yes.
That's what she's seen so far.
Good. So like that's, we see this on the next page, exactly. She thinks that suffering for love is the best. Like that's the best, highest form of love, right? So here on page 44, 45, she says like, when, this is the second paragraph after the break, what Cleophilus has been waiting for, has been whispering and sighing and giggling for, has been anticipating since she was old enough to lean against the window displays of gauze and butterflies and lace, is passion. Not the kind on the cover of the Alarma magazines, mind you, where the lover is photographed with the bloody fork she uses to salvage her good name, but passion in its purest crystalline essence. What do you think that line is about, BTW? Because actually, I wasn't sure either. Like, I wanted to ask you guys. Passion, not the kind on the cover of the Alarma magazines, where the lover is photographed with the bloody fork she used to salvage her good name. It's got to be abortion, right? It's got to be, right? It's the version of a bloody coat hanger, right? Yeah. So not that kind of passion, right? Where it gets you in trouble, but passion in its crystalline essence, the kind of books and songs and telenovelas describe when one finds finally the great love of one's life and does whatever one can, must do, at whatever the cost, Tu o Nadi, You or No One, the title of the current favorite telenovela. The beautiful Lucia Mendez having to put up with all kinds of hardships of the heart, separation and betrayal, and loving, always loving no matter what, because that is the most important thing. And did you see Lucia Mendez on the Bayer aspirin commercials? Wasn't she lovely? Blah, 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 blah. On top of the next page, right before the break, because to suffer for love is good, the pain all sweet somehow in the end. So what does this tell you about what she thinks about love and passion?
That like if you're not suffering for it, is it even like real or true?
Yeah,
Which is a common belief that I feel like is still held.
that what?
I think that's a common belief that's still held now.
Yeah, like
You have to
love should be
suffer.
painful, right? Like especially if you're a woman, right? This woman continues loving through separation, but also betrayal. That's not good. Why would you keep loving someone who betrayed you, right? Make sense? So we get here that for her, love seems to be intense, and the only intensity she knows is like suffering, right? Love and passion should equal suffering. What do you think of this girl and this kind of thought? You know, and we got more hints like, you know, this is what she's been waiting for, whispering and sighing and giggling for. What is she like at the beginning of the story?
I feel bad for her.
Okay. I was gonna say like naive. Is that what you're gonna think?
Yeah,
of?
like inexperienced.
Inexperienced, yeah. So like because like this, like maybe as part of this is that she's naive.
Also raised with just her father and 6 brothers.
Exactly.
Right, as a known brother.
I did not catch that.
Yeah. Her mom's dead. Yeah. So she is also motherless. So I think that's important. Good catch is Isa. Motherless. Good. Okay. Kind of going along with this. So she says right after the break, Seguin. Oh wait, before that, sorry. If you go to like to 44 in that first paragraph after the squiggly line. In the town where she grew up, there isn't very much to do except accompany the aunts and grandmothers to the house of one another to play cards or walk to the cinema to see this week's film again, speckled and with one hair quivering annoyingly on the screen. What does this tell you about her life? Yeah, I'm actually going to go so far as to say it's got to be one of poverty, right? Like her town seems generally poor. You get to see one film per week and it's got like a hair over it. So that like there's a hair in the way and some crud on the screen, right? On the projector screen, right? So I would say poverty. Yeah. So she's naive and inexperienced, motherless, and probably poor. But romantic. Romantic and romanticizes suffering for love. Okay. Back to 45. Seguin, she had liked the sound of it, far away and lovely. Seguin, Tejas, so Texas, a nice sterling ring to it, the tinkle of money. She would get to wear outfits like the women on the tele, like Lucia Mendez, and have a lovely house, and wouldn't Chela be jealous? And yes, will drive all the way to Laredo to get her wedding dress. That's what they say, because Juan Pedro wants to get married right away without a long engagement since he can't take off too much time for work. He has a very important position in Seguin with the beer company, I think, or was it tires? Yeah, he has to be back, so they'll get married in the spring when he can take off work. And they will drive off in his new pickup, did you see it, to their new home in Seguin. What does this tell you about her?
She really doesn't know much.
She doesn't know much about much, right? But especially about
The person that she's supposed to love.
the person that she's marrying, right? She doesn't even know what he does for work. She's kind of actually got this, she can't see him, she can only see the fantasy of married life, right? Exactly.
She'll
So
be able to escape.
I don't think, yeah, but I think she's thinking about like, she says she wants to live a life in a house like Lucia Mendez, which is the one from the
She's like
telenovela.
living vicariously through everybody else but her.
Yeah, like she kind of wants the fairy tale marriage, right? And she thinks getting married will bring her the fairy tale. right? So I got, that's naive, inexperienced, poor, motherless, romantic, and maybe, I'm trying to find a nice way to say clueless. Yeah, naive, inexperienced, yeah. And also like maybe a little bit like gullible, what is it? Ignorant. I mean, it could be ignorant, yeah. Gullible? What is it? Yeah, gullible, blissfully ignorant. What is it when like you can't see what's really in front of you because you're too much in your own head? Oh, yes.
Is it delusional?
Well, it's close. It's not as like negative because she's just like, yeah, you guys get where I'm going though, right? Like,
Brainwashed, maybe, illusion.
I think she's a bit brainwashed by telenovelas, right? So we get love equals, so obviously one of the big themes here is love, right? Specifically, like, yeah, you know,
There's a lot of abusive relationships in telenovelas.
but the abuse is like glorified,
Yeah.
right? And excused and kind of like romanticized. I guess romantic keeps.
And in the books too, it's romanticized.
Yeah, like he loves me so much that he has to,
Yeah.
he just can't control his, like, it's very toxic, right? So love is a very big theme here, specifically, you know, passion, heterosexual love between man and woman. We also got like imagined love or media's representation of love as opposed to reality, right? Reality versus fantasy. And brainwashed because of the media, right? And the media's role here. And then finally we got like familial love, right? Love of family members, parents for children, children for parents, siblings, right? Good. Okay. All right. So I'm on to the second page of the handout now. What are some of the major themes in the story? Or what is a major theme? What word or phrase keeps getting repeated? What ideas or insights seem to emerge? This is one of them, right? Okay. I'm gonna skip the next one, the title of the story, and think about like what is interesting about how Cisneros chose to write her story. Did you notice how the dialogue is written?
Kind of like a stream of like consciousness.
So we have stream of consciousness.
It feels like it kind of almost switches like between the
does,
paragraphs, like-
right?
like
Yeah.
like how it fits into a-
Well, it's like her, but then it's Beck, but then like, so the first sentence is like weirdly detached from her own self, right? And then like, it seems more, you know,
Like the narrator is flickering. like,
yeah,
flickering.
yeah, it's weird, right? And then like on the bottom of 45, it seems like she's talking, you know. He's a beer company to their new home, not exactly new, they're gonna, you know, he can afford it. And later maybe a room or two with children, maybe they be blessed with many. Well, you'll see. Cleophilus has always been so good with her sewing machine. A little of the machine and zaz, miracles. She's always been so clever, that girl, poor thing. Suddenly it's not her, right? That's not her. That's not her talking. But then like 40, 47, right? How could Cleophilus explain to a woman like this why the name woman hollering fascinated her? Well, there was no sense talking to Trini. Like that seems like her, right? Right? It's weird. And then go to, let's see, woman hollering, go to, not that he isn't a good man. Let's see. How could she go back there? Look at page 51, right? This is going to help us kind of circle back to the significance of the title. Okay, so she likes the title of this creek, right? Which is like I looked it up. Title of the creek is what? Like La Gritona. I was never trained in Spanish except for like one summer on Duolingo. So I'm doing my best here, but please please feel free to correct me. La Gritona, did anyone look it up? It's kind of repeated throughout, like, eventually I'd like to take us to 51, but the stream name is first mentioned on 46. La Gritona. Such a funny name for such a lovely ario, which I remember from Duolingo is like creek or river, small stream. And so I looked it up, and what Google Translate told me is it translates to the screaming one. So like so that's kind of what she says. Like she says such a funny name, though no one could say whether the woman had hollered from anger or pain. So it's the screaming one in feminine, so we know it's the screaming woman, right? And Cleophilius is like, why do they call it that? Is she screaming in anger, in rage, or in pain? Right? Okay. All right, go to page 51. All right. All right. 51, there is no place to go unless one counts the neighbor ladies. Soledad on one side, Dolores on the other, or the creek. Don't go out there after dark. Mejita, is that right? What is it? Okay. Stay near the house. No es bueno para la salud. Mala suerte. Suerte? Bad luck? Malare. You'll get sick and the baby too. You'll catch a fright wandering about in the dark, and then you'll see how right we were. What's happening here? Like, she's like imagining how there's nowhere to go, especially for those people who don't drive or have access to a vehicle. And then she says, except for the ladies or the creek. Don't go out there after dark. Who do you think is saying that? The lady she lives next to, or her husband even, right? Right. Stay near the house. No es bueno para la salud. Help me. No es bueno. It's not good for the salud. Anyone? No. I know. Mala suerte, it's got to be bad luck. Mala air is like bad air, right? Right? Don't go out by that river. You'll get sick because the air is bad. You'll catch a fright.
Health.
Yeah, bad health. Okay, good. Yeah. Bad health, bad luck, bad air. The stream's sometimes only a muddy puddle in the summer, though now in the springtime, because of the rain's a good size, alive thing, a thing with a voice all its own, all day and night, calling its high silver voice. Is it La Lorona? That's it, right? La Lorna, thank you. The weeping woman? La Lorna, who drowned her own children? Perhaps La Lorna is the one they named the creek after, she thinks, remembering all the stories she learned as a child. La Lorna is calling to her. She is sure of it. Cleophilus sets the baby's Donald Duck blanket on the grass, listens, the day sky turning to night, the baby pulling up fistfuls of grass and laughing. La Reina. Oh, I messed it up, but wonders if something as quiet as this drives a woman to the darkness under the trees. What do you think? Why do you think she wrote it in this way? So here we got her thinking about the creek, and it's almost like, so things that other people say to her don't get quotation marks, right? This is weird.
Because like she doesn't really have a voice in the story, so it's like
Other people's voices are taking over, right? Yeah.
It'll just be manifesting in her head because she's so used to being like conditioned to the people.
She's conditioned by society, so she doesn't even like, yeah, like their voice becomes her own, right?
Yeah.
It's like she's kind of got this kind of like no boundaries between herself and others. So all of their words becomes her own. She internalizes all the misogyny that she faces, right? As well as all these kind of messages that like, bad, don't go out there, bad luck, bad air, bad health, right? Stay inside where you belong, which again, inside her house is not a safe place for her, right? And we can see this as well if you go back to, let's see. Narration. If you go back to 47. And actually, probably we're going to go right on to 48. The first time she had been so surprised, she didn't cry out or tried to defend herself. She had always said she would strike back if any man were to strike her. So he slapped her once and then again and again until her lips bled an orchid of blood. She didn't fight back. She didn't break into tears. She didn't run away. If you go up to the next page, like how does she react when he hits her?
She's shocked.
She's
like stunned.
silenced, literally, right? Yeah, she's shocked, frozen, paralyzed, and silenced. 48 at the top. Instead, when it happened the first time, when they were barely man and wife, she had been so stunned it left her speechless, motionless, numb. She had done nothing but reach up to the heat on her mouth and stare at the blood on her hand, as if even then she didn't understand. She could think of nothing to say, and said nothing. Just stroked the dark curls of the man who wept and would weep like a child, his tears of repentance and shame, this time and every time. Right? So she doesn't have a voice.
And she's found herself comforting
Him
for
him
actions.
hitting her. Yes, exactly. So that is again kind of like a sign of all of the burdens that women have to bear, right? In a patriarchal society, not only do they have to take the abuse, but then they also have to provide emotional comfort to the abuser after it's done, right?
And take care of their children.
And take care of their children. The children who has the same name as the abusive husband. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
There's Juan Pedro, which is the husband, and Juan Pedrito, right? Which is basically like
Well, that's a good
John
thing to bring
Jr.
up as well with familial
Patriarchy,
love. When you're
right?
in an abusive relationship and you look at your child and you see your abuser in
your
your
child, yeah.
the subliminal hatred that you can have towards your child
Yes.
is not like talked about a lot in literature,
Yeah.
which is why I like this story.
And like that's kind of why she's imagining like also like, taking the kids with her, both to protect them and also
To erase that from them.
yeah. You get right in the after the next break, it talks about how when she sits next to him at the ice house, which I think is a bar. Is that right? Yeah. She sits mute. Like so here she doesn't talk, she doesn't contribute, right? And then go on to I think that he's sleeping with someone else when she's away at the hospital giving birth. Is that
That's how I saw it.
that's how I saw it too. Yeah, so that's at the top of 50. A doubt, slender as a hair. Like, okay. She
It's
talked.
very brushed over though.
It's
that's
very
that-
brushed over,
that two
yeah.
Paragraphs is all that was talked about.
Yeah, and like at one point they talk about her sleeping alone and he doesn't come home all night. And then it's not clear if he's getting drunk or sleeping around, right? But I originally thought it was sleeping around, right? And so like she's so silenced, right? And then if you look at page 51, the description of the river, a thing with a voice all its own, all day and night, calling in its high silver voice, right? The river has a voice. It's a woman with a voice. And that makes it really appealing to her, right? She cannot have a voice, but the river can speak, right? Yeah, let's go, keep going. Let's see. Women murdered by men in their lives. If you look at 53, again, like the kind of voices are really interesting. If you look at like the third paragraph after the break, she could write to her father and ask maybe for money, just a loan for the new baby's medical expenses. Well, then if he'd rather she didn't, all right, she won't. Please don't anymore. Please don't. She knows it's difficult saving money with all the bills they have, but how else are they going to get out of debt with the truck payments? And after the rent and the food and the electricity and the gas and the water and the who knows what, well, there's hardly anything left, but please, at least for the doctor's visit, she won't ask for anything else. She has to. Why is she so anxious? Because like you get only one side of her conversation, right? Especially that please don't anymore, please don't. Like, I don't know what she's referring to there. That's kind of left to our own imagination, right?
I felt like it was like, stop asking for help, but also don't mess up.
Yeah. And then we get Felicia and Grace, is it Grace Leah? Gracelia? And Felice? If you look at 55, so she finally gets away from him, but the phone call is really weird. It's very cinematic, right? It feels like a TV show almost, right? Telenovela, right? 54, Felice, it's me, Grace Celia. No, I can't talk louder, I'm at work. Look, I need kind of a favor. There's a patient, the lady here with a problem. Yeah, anyway, so they get her a ride to San Antonio. And this woman who takes her is named Felice. If you look at 55, when they drove across the Ario, the driver opened her mouth and let out a yell as loud as any mariachi, which startled not only Cleophilus, but Juan Pedrito as well. Pues, look how cute. I scared you two, right? Sorry, I should have warned you. Every time I cross that bridge, I do that because of the name, you know, woman hollering. Pues, a holler. She said this in a Spanish popped with English and laughed. Did you ever notice, Felice continued, how nothing around here is named after a woman? Really? Unless she's a virgin. I guess you're only famous if you're a virgin. She was laughing again. That's why I like the name of that Ario. Makes you want to holler like Tarzan, right? What do you think? What do you think is the significance of the title? It's like woman hollering creek at the beginning of the thing. She could only think about a woman hollering in pain or rage, right? And I think because she can only imagine a woman in a patriarchal abusive place, right? That makes sense. I think that like one thing I wanted to mention is like the men don't speak here either, right? She says their fists try to speak. So it's not just her who's silenced, but like everyone is silenced in this kind of toxic society, right? But now towards the end, woman hollering like Tarzan. What do you think? Makes you want to scream like Tarzan. How does, like, why does Tarzan yell?
Maybe a YouTuber, like
Um,
raised by like primitive nature.
Okay.
and has the ability.
Letting
to-
loose?
Yeah.
I thought Tarzan yelled to warn people. Like, come in because he was swinging to the thing, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're thinking of George of the
He yelled
Jungle.
because he put-
Exactly. Freedom, right? He just yells for the pure experience of it outside of language, right? Just voice, just, you know, expressing his purest, deepest, most essential self, right? So I have scream in freedom or in laughter or in release, right? And Cleophilia is kind of scandalized by it all, right? She's scandalized that Police has a pickup truck. She's scandalized that Police talks about Pontiac Sunbirds as pussy cars. But towards the end, like Felice was like no woman she'd ever met. Can you imagine when we crossed the Ario, she just started yelling like crazy? She would later say to her father and brothers, just like that, who would have thought? Who would have? Pain or rage, perhaps, but not a hoot like the one Felice had just let go. Makes you want to holler like Tarzan, Felice had said. And then Felice began laughing again, but it wasn't Felice laughing. It was the gurgling out of her own throat, a long ribbon of laughter, like water. So instead of now identifying with the women in the telenovelas who see passion and love as rage and pain and suffering, now she can see, you know, she can think of a voice as freedom, right? As water, as empowerment. Yeah? Hard. All right, so what about how to tame a wild tongue, which I've kind of neglected? We're just about out of time, but this is from Gloria Enzeldula. Whoops. I think I accidentally answered that, but then I hung up on them, so. The dentist, I'm not feeling bad at all about that, right? I got you the English translations. These are all the English translations to all her Spanish stuff in here, because her Spanish stuff is actually very pretty. She like has like what she says in English is very like bare bones and very bare bones and kind of matter of fact and kind of brutal. But the stuff she has in Spanish is super poetic and beautiful. But she was silenced in all these different ways, not because she was a Mexican living in America, because she was a Chicana living in America. And so her English was not good enough, right, for Americans. And her Spanish is not good enough for the Mexicans, right? Or the people who are educated in Spanish. And so like, she says like how she's silenced by both sides of the culture, right? How she is living in the borderland and how that actually gives her some empowerment after being silenced in all these ways. Anyway, so I didn't get to do with you. How do you see Enzeldula's essay reflecting Cleophila's experience in Woman Hollering Creek, or in what ways does this not reflect the experience of Cleophilas and others? I almost feel like the writer of this one, BTW, this one's nonfiction. Fiction. Oops. Fiction, nonfiction, right? I gave you a bit of both. But here you can see like, this is fiction, it's an essay, but it's still literary, right? Make sense? All right. I didn't do that. You could do that for your. Thank you. Yes, that thing. Yeah. So you could do any of the last two questions, which we didn't get around to. Like, how does this compare to Girl by Jamaica Kincaid? Or how does this compare to Bell Hooks's Talking Back that we did last class? We didn't do any of that. So you can do that for your analytic response. For Thursday, we're going to read Ralph Ellison's Battle Royale, which is very, very cool. And George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant. Anyone read any of those before? You did? Shooting an Elephant? It's classic. Yeah. He's one of the few white men who made it in.
Yeah, LaJoy introduced me to that book.
Yeah. I mean, Orwell's pretty cool. He wrote 1984, which is like a dystopian novel. And yeah. Anyway, I will let you go now. It is 12:08, so I'm over by 3 minutes, and I will see you Thursday. See you then. I will bring how to shoot an elephant or the shooting the elephant thing to you next class, okay? You're still doing
Are you serious?
I know.
They ask me every day. I'm like, I don't know.
it. No, I'll let you know. I'll definitely let you know once they
We're
have the
crossing
vote.
our fingers.
I know, me too.
Bye. See you.
Bye. You too. See you Friday, Thursday, whatever. Whatever. Yeah.